Okay, so some of the things we just talked about. SNTTC1A, SNTTC1A. It's not a big publication. And it is personnel qualification and certification in NDT. So it's just going to be, it's levels of qualification. It's all about just how you run your program. It does not tell you how to do NDT. It's just the certification process and the quality control in that. So recommended practice in personnel qualification, training programs, examinations, certification, technical performance evaluations, interrupted service, recertifications, termination, reinstatement. That's it. So NAS 410, pretty much the same thing. NAS certification and qualification, non-destructive testing personnel. What do we got? Definitions, documents, employers, evaluations, examinations, training, methods, qualifications, other examinations, certifications. So it doesn't tell you how to do anything. And then CP 189, I think I had that. Yeah, or more for oil and gas, but same thing, qualifications and standardization. So this is not how to do it. It's just how to be certified. So the next thing I had on my notes, well, we'll just do this. There are levels, and then we'll do, I have NAS 410 hours, and because what only NAS matters to me, NAS 410 hours. And that, rather than writing them all down, we'll just go back to my PowerPoint slide. There's your NAS 410 hours. Just for these 4 procedures, I'm not going to put them all in there, but basically it's 16 times 2 for a level 2. So you need 16 hours level 1, 16 again for 32 hours. If you go to Hillier, which I was just showing over the break, one of the schools that's down in Anaheim, they're a big school and they have online stuff too, and I've used them for, I don't know, maybe 5 classes now. They don't have like a level 1 for PT or MT because it's too short. So you usually go for the 1 and 2, and that's 32 hours. But you know, like I mentioned, just look at level 1. It's 40 hours just for level 1 for ET, 40 hours for UT, plus massive amount of experience. And they, huh?
Is it the same for level 3? It just goes up another 40, or is it?
I don't remember. In addition to being a level, the level 3 hours are they're kind of hard. Not only is it hours, but it's education comes into play. You're supposed to have a bachelor's degree in a or higher, and I think that had to do with how many hours in a STEM category class. So having a master's degree in aviation helped me with the hours that I needed.
Where did you get that?
My master's? I think I graduated in 18 or 19 or something. I don't remember.
Congratulations.
I've had it for 3-4 years.
How was it doing online?
Congrats. That's just not easy.
Yeah. How was it doing it online? I prefer online
Really?
because I don't necessarily like listening to people. Sometimes it drags on, and so I'm sorry for you guys. I enjoy reading my own publications, taking my own notes, but good Lord, do you write a lot. You know, you got to write your master's thesis. It's very lengthy. All right. So there's your hours. Oh, yeah, okay, we'll get back to that. All right, hours, which we did. All right. I know I'm circling back around a few things. Hopefully it kind of helps you to understand. So employer certification. So this is you wanting to get certified by an employer, which is generally speaking how you're going to go. If you do the central certification, I'm just telling you, be aware, it's oil and gas. It's so much, it's like it doesn't have anything to do with our industry. You know, my specialization, when I'm doing it, I'm doing crankshafts, camshaft, cons rods, gears, crankcases, and then you get out there and it's pipelines and rails and, you know, trucks off of trains. Like, what the, I don't know what to do with this stuff. So, one, you're going to receive classroom training, which you're going to get, right? Receive classroom training. And I'm asking you all to keep track of your hours that you spend in lab on NDT. Just write it on your thing. And you don't need like 3:30 to just write one day, and what is that? 4 hours over there, right? So there you go. Plus you're going to receive 2 hours every night here. So one day, if you spend all day with me, that's 6 hours. So we just want to keep track. You want to get 16 in fluorescent. You want to get 16 in mag particle. I'll get a certificate for you. Check. Received classroom training. And then written test administered by written test. Written tests administered by employer, general and specific. So by general, I mean it's going to be a big overview. It's like it's going to cover some manufacturing, something on ultrasound, something on eddy current, something on X-ray, something, whatever they feel is appropriate. And then very specific. Okay, now we want you're going to be doing fluorescent penetrant. So we're going to ask you, what are the methods? What are the different forms of developer? Which one is the most sensitive? What's the process for using a post-emulsified product? And you have to know all of that stuff. Or maybe they don't. Maybe they only use one very specific product. And they just want you to know that one. So it'd be up to the employer. And then a practical. Practical exam administered by employer. Administered by employer. And that doesn't have to be exactly some major formal thing. When I did mine, it was just, we hired a level 3. It came down, it kind of looked at my procedure, watched what I did, said, all right, man, you're doing great. Just, we're happy with that, no problem. Eye exam, what's that?
Practical exam would just be actually doing it?
Yeah. Eye exam administered by employer. So you got to have your eye exam. You got to do 2 things. One, you got to have near vision using a Jaeger chart. And it can be correct. These Jaeger charts, I would need different glasses to do Jaeger charts.
They call me Meister. You got to drink it straight, or you got to drink it from a Red Bull. If it comes a Red Bull, we're golden.
Oh yeah, black licorice syrup.
I apologize. I don't remember offhand which.
Reading off the Scantron?
It's Jaeger 1. You have to be able to read Jaeger 1. Because it's the one I have trouble reading.
How close do you get to be?
It says right on there. And you can be correctable.
Your glasses on.
Let me see.
Hey, you have to have near vision.
So if you have bad eyesight, you get shit out of luck.
Yeah, you can't do it. Also,
0%? Is that what that is?
what's that?
Is 1 the 0%?
I think so. It's right here. Here's a copy of the Jaeger chart. And I believe you have to read J1, which it doesn't matter up here because who knows what might. And then the next thing you have to have is Ishihara's test for color deficiency.
Oh yeah, those are fun.
53.
83.
That's a 5 and a 3.
5 plus 3 is 8.
Okay.
Don't see nothing if you're
Yeah.
Does anyone see nothing? That's what.
Do you see
Do
Do you see anything?
No, I'm just asking. Is anyone colorblind?
Yeah, does anybody have trouble? Yeah.
You're colorblind.
It's a little more, if you were looking at my screen, it was very obvious. When I look at these, I'm like, that's actually a little difficult, but on my screen, it's like, it's just obviously a 5 and a 3. So you got an Ishihara test. All right. So near vision and color. That's the Ishihara. Ishihara test. Where am I here? Oh, lasts for 5 years. So when I was at Helier doing this last time, there were so many people. There was so many people in there, very interesting people. I really enjoyed it. The first class I had, the instructor was not up to speed at all. I think that the people in the class, some of them definitely knew more than he did. He just wasn't. He was oil and gas again. It was an NAS 410 class, and this guy's oil and gas, and he'd worked pipelines and never used a bench Magnaflux machine before. He had used portable stuff, and so he kind of understood portable. But the people in there, like one lady, she was cool. I mean, she did, I think, gun barrels for the military. Yeah, she did gun barrels. Another guy did something else for the military. They're military contractors. So they all did really cool stuff. He did some with tanks. I mean, it was just like, wow. I mean, they knew their stuff. It was amazing. I mean, but they were very specific to that one thing. And man, they were panicking. I mean, it was some major panic because if they didn't pass a test, they're unemployed. And the test, even at the school, they were hard. And I argued about some of them. I mean, this just wasn't right. And I'm telling you, I was doing homework till late at night, just trying to, they would give you reading and tests and stuff. I'm like, damn, I was planning on, like, yeah.
Let's go.
Okay, so that's let's say about certification probably for now. All right, but let's look at where all this comes from. So, as an example, Lycoming service instruction 1285, and let me see, I pulled it up. I have Foxtrot, and this one is still Foxtrot. Okay. So this one right here, and remember we talked about Lycoming service instructions the other day, which, there's the manual, and the manual says that the service instructions are part of this, and so you want to do non-destructive testing on Lycoming engines. Let me tell you, when I was doing it, it would look very different than this piece of paper. It just had a chart, and it said crankshafts and the amperage and what to look for. Okay, this does not do that at all. And you will notice, I don't see a chart anywhere on here with the word amperage even showing up anywhere. So that's just to kind of give you an idea how much this stuff has changed. So what are they telling you? Now how do they tell you to do it? Because before, like I said, crankshaft, 2,000 amp. His hair is like, wow, man. 2,000 amps, look in the fillets and the radius. And so here we go, without reading the whole thing. This service instruction includes a directive advising not to use visible dye in non-destructive testing because it can adversely affect future results of NDT. Remember I mentioned that. Can't use visible because it's going to screw you up for fluorescent later. Visible is a half of the level is half. It's junk, as where the other stuff is not. It goes up to level 4. Also identifies the necessary personnel qualifications. It used to not say that. Let me see. Requirements for NDT personnel who complete the magnetic inspections Lycoming engines must be qualified and certified to a written procedure in accordance with NAS 410. So now, if you're doing this in a shop, you've got to have a written procedure that your level 3 has come up with. The Lycoming's not spitting it out here. Also, personnel who make or accept or reject decisions during these requirements must be qualified and certified to at least a level 2. So if you're not a level 2, you can't tell me that crankshaft's good or bad. You can do the test and set it aside for level 2. Let me tell you, that will never frickin' work. I mean, there's no way, because you're doing multiple tests, and so you'd have to do like one test and set it aside, and then level 2 would come in and say, okay, when I got indication, let's wipe and redo, and you're like, oh, put it back in the machine. So no. Must be written procedures for both magnetic and fluorescent have been approved by someone who is qualified and certified to level 3. So your level 3 is going to set up your procedures, identify information, materials, instructions, processing. All processes and variant materials techniques must comply with the requirements in ASTM E1444, which is magnetic particle inspection, or the E1417 fluorescent. So you're going to read these ASTM publications that are going to guide you then in how to set up the procedures. So hopefully you can see how that works. Now there's a little bit. NDT level 3 approved technique for mag particle must be able to identify the smallest indication regardless of its orientation to the magnetic flux field. You'll understand that next week. Technique must establish at least 2 magnetic fields perpendicular to one another in a plane parallel to the surface examined. Which again, that's just saying it's got a field going this way, then one going this way as well. Fluorescent pen must use an NDT level 3 approved technique that includes all processing parameters, including acceptance criteria, for correct inspection of the engine parts. So then they kind of go through. But what I wanted to do is bring up, these are the guidelines that you must be looking at. Do not use visible dye for these inspections because visible dye penetrant materials have an adverse effect on future penetrant inspections, causing indications to be tightly closed. They made that in bold and then they underlined it. Do you think they're serious about it?
Maybe.
Yeah. Because, you know, they know mechanics. Let's see here. Yeah, it says something about non-destructive testing. I'm not going to what not to do. Don't you? Okay. Boy, they did it twice. One there, one here. So okay, won't use red. Next. All right. So
So the level 3 is kind of like an IA in a way.
yeah, very good. It really is. Okay, so we just kind of went over that. Do you want to say anything? I don't feel we need to write all these things down unless you really wanted to. I wrote, must be qualified, certified to written procedure. What's the written procedure? Must be qualified and certified to what level? Or not level. What publication? Oh, you guys are so good. Who is allowed to do the make or, accept or reject decision? Must be a level? 2. Who writes the procedure? 3. Oh, man, you guys are awesome. Procedures and the procedures must meet which qualifications? The procedures must meet which qualifications? ASTM.
ASTM plus 1.
And the other one is ASTM as well. I don't need you to remember the numbers, but it's E1444 for MT and E1417 for PT. What does Teledyne tell us? What did Teledyne? Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. I call them Teledyne Continental Motors because I'm old. They're not really Teledyne Continental Motors anymore, but I'm still going to call them TCM. It's Continental Engines, which I think is now owned by Textron? No, Chinese company bought them. They're not Teledyne. They're just Continental Motors. All right, Continental Motors. What do they say? They want it, again, in accordance with ASTM 1417, 1208. So it's all these ASTMs. They spell out fluorescent penetrant methods A, B, C, or D, and personnel certified to level 2 using procedures approved by level 3. So we see it again now. So, all right, let's move on.
Is there any big differences between the Lycoming and Continental in like the requirements for the MDT?
No, not very, very little. The only thing I see is that TCM actually spells out methods A, B, C, or D, which we'll get into. So, all right, definitions. Definitions. An indication. An indication. That is a response from an NDT method. A response. From an NDT method. So, for example, you guys are doing fluorescent penetrant right now, and we finish the process, we take it in the dark room, and we're looking under a black light, and we see a green stripe running out of a hole. That is it's an indication, all right? It's plain and simple. We put it in the green fluid, we took it out of the green fluid, we washed it off, we dried it, we put a developer, we took it in, and now there should be no green fluid, and we see green fluid. So we have, it's just cut and dry. You have an indication. Now what comes next is you have to interpret it. So now you have an interpretation. which is determining whether or not an indication is relevant or non-relevant. So, in other words, this green indication you have matches your thumbprint perfectly. So what does that tell me?
It's your thumbprint.
It is your thumbprint stuck on there. So is that a relevant or not relevant indication? It's probably irrelevant. So determining whether or not an indication is relevant or non-relevant. In doing magnetic particle inspection, what you're doing is you're creating a very large and powerful magnet out of, well, I shouldn't say large, powerful. You're creating a magnet out of the part. You're putting this fluid on the part, which has fluorescent metal filings in it, if you will. And wherever there's a flux leakage, these magnetic particles are going to line up. So if you have a crack, then you're going to have a flux leakage across the crack, and then these particles be attracted to that flux leakage, and then they're going to show you what the crack looks like. Well, if I have a part that is shaped like this, a T, there's this area right here where the two pieces are, and there's always going to be a little flux leakage there at that corner. And so if I have flux leakage there at that corner, it's going to give me what's the word? An indication. And now my job is to do an interpretation. Is it relevant or non-relevant? So, yeah. It would be non-relevant because it's a flux leakage at a corner, usually indicated by the fact that you use too much amperage. So.
I remember you saying the dye penetrant was, you said half, what was it, half?
The red visible dye
Yeah.
is a sensitivity level of half.
Okay, so what's the fluorescence, 4 or 5?
The fluorescent goes from 1 to 4.
1 to
I really think there's a 5 in there somewhere, but the books say 4. Maybe my notes will correct me somewhere, but I thought there was a 5. So a false indication, an indication that is interpreted to be caused by a condition other than a discontinuity. So an indication that is interpreted to be caused by a condition other than a discontinuity. And a discontinuity is a fancy word. We don't say crack because a crack is something that's necessarily open to the surface. A discontinuity is just like it says. It's not continuous. It's a void. It's a manufacturing process. It's a crack. It covers that. So, we'll just say that, discontinuity. Discontinuity, a lack of continuity, an interruption in the physical properties of the part. So, a lack of continuity. An interruption in the physical properties of the part. An interruption in the physical properties of the part. Well, is discontinuity good or bad?
Bad.
Is it cause for rejection?
Yep. Well, it depends.
It absolutely depends on the spec. There are a lot of specs that are going to allow for a discontinuity of a certain size, shape, location. I'm moving it. You okay? All right. You know, you haven't been here the last couple of days. They didn't have a pace car. It was really awful for these
Oh, I
people.
heard.
Did you actually watch what I was talking about you?
I actually had a question about that, man.
All right. Non-relevant indication. Non-relevant indication. An indication that is caused by a condition or type of discontinuity that is non-rejectable. So, an indication. Indication that is caused by a condition or type. By a condition or type. Where there, of discontinuity that is non-rejectable. Such as a lapse seam, or you have to remember that a lot of what we're talking about and the material that I'm pulling it from has so much to do with manufacturing, not so much with the end aviation part. I am aware of only one particular item in all of aviation, right, where it can have a known crack, and that's some continental crankcases are allowed to have a crack. But I don't even know offhand if that crack is allowable if you're doing an overhaul or repair on an engine. I think it's just in service you can have it and see it. But if you take it apart and disassemble it and you're doing work on it, overhaul, I don't think it's an allowable. I would not accept it. Relevant indication.
Wouldn't you be nervous for one to even fly the plane if you saw a crack in it?
Oh, I'd poo, man.
Yeah, like,
Maybe the poo be coming out. Hey,
I don't
crack?
know why
No.
You're talking about flying with a crack in it.
Yeah.
What the hell?
Relevant indication.
You tried to give us yours. If I was on crack, I'd fly, but
Let's see, where am I? Relevant indication, yeah, F. An indication that is caused by a condition or type of discontinuity that requires evaluation. So relevant indication, and indication that is caused by a condition or type of discontinuity that requires evaluation. You know, thankfully for me, in my job in NDT, it kind of stopped there. A relevant indication for me was cause for rejection. So I kind of lumped it in this. Well, I'm being a little too general, but if you look at the definition here, non-relevant indication, an indication that is caused by a condition or type of discontinuity, meaning there is a discontinuity that is non-rejectable. We just didn't have those in aviation. There are no discontinuities that are allowed that I was ever aware of. So anything that was determined to be a discontinuity was then evaluated to be cause for rejection. But it's not that way in all NDT for certain. You can get non-relevant indications. Well, okay, a good example. So when you're doing a crankshaft, there are bushings that go through the flange, and they're pressed in. And you're always going to get an indication around where they're pressed in because there is a discontinuity. The metal is not continuous. So you will get an indication. So that would be deemed a non-relevant indication. Then if I was doing something and I saw a little line show up in one of the rod journals or something, right there, that is a relevant indication. An indication that's caused by a condition or type of discontinuity that requires evaluation. So then I would say, okay, aha, right in the middle of this polished journal, I have a relevant indication. And of course, and I'll show you guys how you do it. You'd retest, polish, retest. And then if it became that, then from there I would have to figure out what to do with it, which becomes the hard part. So a flaw, an imperfection or discontinuity that may be detectable by NDT but is not necessarily rejectable. So now I found a flaw. Aha! There's a little line showing up. There is a flaw. But then you're going to take it one more step and say, is that flaw a defect or acceptable? Well, it's always not acceptable in aviation. But I did have the option of, do I want to send it out and have it ground and see if it comes out or not? An imperfection or discontinuity that may be detectable. And it's two words, maybe, not maybe detectable, may be detectable by NDT, but is not necessarily rejectable, but is not necessarily rejectable. And the last one I have on here is a defect. A flaw whose size, shape, or other properties do not meet acceptance criteria. So defect is bad. A flaw whose size, shape, or other properties do not meet acceptance criteria. Whew. All right, there's your precursor to NDT. That brings my next point. Liquid penetrant basics. All right, we did the Ishihara. That's what I got there. Oh, that's for fun. Oh, we got a little bit of time left. This, a lot of these pictures I actually took at Helier. This is just a tight crack in a weld using visible dye. This right here, the name of the card's going to come to me in a minute. But these are really expensive. These cards are like $1,000. Let me see if I can find. No, my bad. But they're really cool. And what they are is they actually chrome plate these cards. They're aluminum or steel, chrome plated, and they punch it from the back, and they give a certain star pattern. And I want to say they're like $800 for these, and they're about yay big, and they have 5 star patterns on it. But they're produced by the NDT companies, and they're certified. They come with a calibration card and everything, so that part of your process control is that you actually put these in through the process in the morning, and you should get these star indications at the end of your process. If you're not, then either you're wrong, your water rinse is wrong, your materials are bad. So it's a way to make sure that you get an indication on the back end that you're supposed to be getting. I said I wanted to get a bunch of them, but you know they're pretty pricey. Let's see.
Budget cards.
Yeah, budget. Oh, there they are. That's them. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 punches. And what's interesting is this is chrome. This has been like blasted or something. And so it kind of helps you judge. You have to wash it in such a way that you're getting it off both sides. But yeah, there's the card that you get, the reference card.
That's cool.
Yeah, and the picture. Let me see what else we have. There's other ones. I think that was an X-ray one or something. Yeah, I don't have very many good pictures there. Where am I at? Okay, here we go. All right, liquid penetrant basics. Liquid penetrant is a non-destructive testing method for locating surface discontinuities. Surface discontinuities. In other words, crack what? So this is a big deal here. So liquid penetrant inspection is an NDT method for locating surface discontinuities. In other words, can you finish this? In other words,
You have to see it.
no.
It's on the surface.
Yeah, what does that mean?
It's subsurface.
It's gotta be able to penetrate it.
The crack, using colloquial words, must be open to the surface. If the crack is subsurface or sealed over, this ain't going to work. You are not going to get an indication. SOL. Basic operating principle. One, the part is cleaned.
Is that what that accident does?
I come back around and really go more into depth. I was thinking, wow, boy, I didn't write very much right here. So I'm going to come back around and do a lot more in depth on each one of these subjects. Penetrant is applied. This whole cleaning process, boy, if you don't clean it right, you're already dead in the water. You can't use abrasives. Like glass bead, sandblasting on aluminum, forget it. You'll actually peen the crack over and seal it up and hide the crack. So, try and hide the crack. That's how you do it. You have to be. So I use walnut, and even that, like I wouldn't use walnut on 032. That would be stupid. You can't use wire wheels. I'd be very careful even using wire brushes. Again, I didn't do it on 032. I was doing it on crank cases, which are thick castings. And so my cleaning would be, I'd put it in the hot sea washer. I had one of those, and would pressure wash it. And then we had a dip tank that was a caustic kind of chemical that would strip most of the paint. It's mostly soap-based, alkali, that's what it was. Then put it back in the hot sea and see if you can blow the paint off. Then we put it in the walnut, or I use plastic bead. Put it in the plastic bead booth. Plastic, get all the paint and any carbon off. Then put it back in the hot sea. Then you would spend a long time cleaning it with air nozzles and fresh water. Probably a crankcase, 15-20 minutes, just picking at it, getting all the bead out, making sure every passage is completely clear. There's 100% no glass or plastic bead left. Then after that, then it would go into the penetrant station. And so once it's fully cleaned, penetrant is applied. Penetrant is applied. Then we have penetrant is allowed to set. Penetrant is allowed to set. To sit on the part. That's called dwell time. well on the part. And what it does, and the penetrant seeps in. So penetrant seeps into cracks. I'm going to write cracks because discontinuity is just too painful to write over and over. Penetrant is removed. That really depends on how you remove it, depends on the process. So if you're using like the visible dye, then which is a, let's go visible dye, and it's not water washable, that's a solvent based, and there are actually fluorescent solvent based. We'll just say if you're using solvent based, then you're going to use a solvent remover. You're going to do a dry cloth, then you're going to wipe it all down with the dry cloth and keep going until you've got as clean as you can with the dry cloth, lint-free cloth. Then you're going to put a little bit of cleaner on another cloth, and you're going to keep working that as much as you can until it is completely clean. Then you take another dry cloth and you're going to clean that again. So it's dry, wet, dry, then it's clean. Now if it's like water washable, then we're going to rinse it in water. If it's maybe, some of them aren't, they're oil based and they have to have emulsifier. We're going to put an emulsifier on and then wash it off, and that gets very complicated. So penetrant is removed, and that depends on what you're doing. I'm just going to set, there's some drying involved here, but it depends on the process. So we're doing basics. Penetrant is removed. Developer is applied. Part is inspected. Just trying to get, and indications are evaluated. That's V, VI, VII, and there. That brings us to the end of our time together.